Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer. He's on the East Coast. We're looking at the NBA on Wednesday here. Got a few more games than we had on Tuesday. And we went 2-2 in the best bets and a lot of weirdness that just came up. Everybody just sort of ruled out late. So you've got to be staying on top of these injury reports in the NBA. Even if a guy is not on the injury report right now, he may very well be there by come the afternoon of today on Wednesday. So definitely make sure you're staying on top of that stuff. We're going to be bringing you the best bets we have for some sides and totals in this one. Also have player props up specifically in a separate episode. So make sure you're checking all that stuff out. Subscribe to that page to follow along all season. Nate, let's go ahead and get into your first pick here. We're talking about the Mavs and the Pellies.
Yeah, faded the Mavs on the front end of the back-to-back because they got whooped down low once again by the Nuggets. But now I will take the Mavs against the Pelicans, who with both teams on a back-to-back because, I mean, Pelicans ain't whipping anybody down low. Like, that's the biggest thing is, like, otherwise I'd be really nervous about Derek Lively being out, about Kyrie potentially resting on the back-to-back here. But, I mean, the Pels have the third lowest rim frequency in their last 10, and that's even with Zion playing, 5 games in there? Like, half the games, they're shooting 65% in the paint when they do get in there, which is bottom 10 again. So I don't think that offensively they're going to be a huge problem for a Mavs team that still has size, right? They still have Gafford, still have PJ, who I like here, and a little Najee Marshall revenge. So I think they'll be able to defend just fine here in a bounce back spot. And will the Pels defend? They just lost Herb Jones for the season, right? Big deal. Without him, they're 4-17 with a 120 defensive rating. They were just starting to get whole, right? When you get Herb and Trey Murphy out there together, you can actually defend. And they've on the back-to-back set here, you almost expect zero chance of Zion. I mean, maybe there's a non-zero chance he plays, but I don't think he'll be going. And their last couple back-to-backs have been a pretty decisive drop-off in terms of like lost by 19 to Portland, trailed by 33 at one point, and lost the paint points edge there considerably. Same kind of story to Memphis. Actually won the story, the battle down low against Memphis, and still gave up 132 though. And so the Mavs, yeah, I mean, is Kyrie going to play? I mean, you could see that for sure. I mean, but nobody else played more than 26 minutes last night because Jokic just put them to bed early. So they should be fresh otherwise. They are 5-2, both straight up and ATS on back-to-backs this season. Average margin of victory as a favorite is 8 points per game. Very small spread here, of course. And the Pels, like I said, because of those back-to-backs to a degree, they're failing to cover by 7 points a game, 3-6 against the spread in this situation. So, yeah, give me the Mavs to bounce back.
I like it. It's a good spot. They had Kyrie on that very clear restriction yesterday. That game was never really going to be close with Denver at full strength, like you called there. And now you come back against a Pellies team that like they covered for me last night against the Bulls. They didn't make it easy, and I didn't think it was going to be a blowout because they don't have the they don't have the latitude for us to just say they're going to blow anybody out. And now, like you're saying, they're going to be completely undermanned. This is just such a bad spot for New Orleans, which has been basically the whole season has been a bad spot for them. And now it's particularly bad on this second night of that back-to-back. Going back home doesn't matter. Herb out for the season, such a killer, man. Herb Jones is like your favorite basketball player's favorite basketball player, and now we don't get to watch him for this season. But let me go over to Philly and New York, where Philly, god damn you, Philly. Brunson 25 plus, the money line for the Knicks. Combine those together, you can get plus 111 on FanDuel. Make sure you shop that wherever you do have availability and accounts. But New York is heating up. And I don't know what Philly's doing. I still don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I know that they geared up for this game. It was obviously we're going to. It's a nationally televised one. You've got Joel Embiid coming out. I'm sure he's going to try hard on offense for as long as he can be out there. Tyrese Maxey and Paul George both missed, so they're all going to be out there in this one. And I don't really care. It still has not come together when the three of them are on the floor together. If you look at Paul George, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, put them in a 3-man lineup, look at their net rating. It is like plus 1.2. over the course of like 42 minutes. That's not what you need from your big three. Obviously, this is not a team in contention right now, but if they were going to ever be this season, that number needs to climb tremendously to like double digits plus net rating for those three on the floor together. Or there's nothing even here. There's no point to any of this for them. But if you want to get into the specifics of the matchup here, New York is attacking a ton in the last 10 games, which I am very appreciative of as a fan, because I think one of the things missing from the Knicks and the sort of, I don't know, like the soul of the Knicks, the personality that the Knicks fans want to see, is a little bit less 45 jump shots a game and a little bit more going to the rim. And Cat has answered the call there. He's finally leading the team. Not finally, he's leading the team in drives. And I think will continue to be a problem for Joel if he guards him. And if he doesn't guard him, then who is guarding Cat? Because if it's Paul George, we got Mouse in the house. If it's Yabusele, we got Mouse in the house and somebody who's not going to be able to stay in front of him as he drives to the rim. So I think Cat's going to be a problem here from that standpoint, but that's also just going to open up everything for Jalen Brunson, which has been how things have worked for them in the last 10 games, where they are number 1 points in the paint. Philly is 21st, limiting those points in the paint. And I will say they're a bit better with Joel out there, limiting those points in the paint. That's obvious. But once again, against the Knicks, part of the reason they've been able to get into the paint so easily is they don't have any cement-footed centers or anybody standing in there that cannot shoot. And that's going to continue to leave that paint open for them, because there's nobody that you can sag off of, because we now have the best shooting big man in the history of the NBA, according to Cat. The transition, I think, will also be a problem. The Knicks are super efficient, number 1 most efficient transition offense, top 15 in terms of the points, because they play at a slower pace. But when they get out and they're scoring. And if you look at Philly with Joel this year, they're like the same team, man. I mean, they're better record-wise. They're 7-6 with him, but the offensive rating, the same. The defensive rating, basically the same. That's where they're better, is with Joel on defense. And once again, I think that's going to be neutralized by Cat. If you're looking at JB, just to get to him to the 25 points, this is what he does against this team. He gets them, and basically he gets Joel in the blender, right? And he does what he wants at that point. They won by 12 in the last game. He only took 15 shots. That was on November the 12th. The turnaround for this team really started in the last 15 to 20 games, not really the first 10 or so, where they really started to figure things out on offense. You look at their O rating in around the time frame of this last game with Jalen Brunson, it was all whack. Him taking 15 shots tells you that. They were still at a 108 offensive rating over the course of the week or two that when they played this game. Now they're basically at the top of the league. They're 120 points per game, or 120 offensive rating rather, not points because they play too slowly. But they picked up the pace a bit. Jalen Brunson's going to get in there on the pick and roll, where this team is not good at defending the pick and roll ball handler with Joel out there specifically. And the pull up jump shot should be there for him, and then obviously everything in the lane. And most importantly for him, probably getting to the free throw line. I could see 8 to 10 free throws for him. This team is number 1 now in number 4, in free throw attempt rate on their last 10 games, with Jalen Brunson doing the bulk of that, getting his free throw attempt rate up. So that's where I'm at with this one. I think they cover. I think they can't cover easily, but I just like them to win on the road.
Yeah, hard to forecast a cover when there's the top 3 guys are questionable for Philly, or they have to make up a new injury designation for apparently what Philly is doing, which is just who the fuck knows if they're going to play. But yeah, I mean, I would hope Embiid's in there for Brunson to just cook him, like you're saying. Like he's a turnstile with Brunson out there. If PG plays, honestly, Kelly Oubre has done a better job on Brunson than PG. So I'm just not really worried about any individual matchup for him. I agree with you, especially coming off a loss. Like you look last time they lost to OKC, he drops 44 on Milwaukee. They lost to OKC the first time in early January, 33 the next game. JB to bounce back and carry the Knicks, one way or another. I mean, you could just take his points at 26.5 and not worry about win or lose until you see how this injury report shakes out, I suppose. Second pick here is another Spurs under. It's 239 in San Antonio this time. It was the wrong call on Monday, as the Lakers just continued to show why they are dead last in many defensive metrics over the past few weeks, allowing a 134 offensive rating to the Spurs. I mean, give the Lakers some slack. I mean, it is quite distracting and tragic down there in LA. But as far as how this affected the line, this is pretty inflated because of that performance. In the previous 4, Spurs had a 107 offensive rating. They went under in 9 of their previous 11. They are much less effective and play with much less pace on individual possessions when they don't have Jeremy Sohan, who remains out here. So that gives me confidence that they're not going anywhere near 130 again, which they got there. Look at even when they played fast with Chicago, that game got to 224. Even when they went to OT with the Nuggets, 233. And on the other side, I don't think Memphis is going to be on their normal stuff. Even before I looked at the recent matchups with Wemby in there, I was like, this is a good matchup for the Spurs. to limit Memphis. Memphis is not a great 3-point shooting team. They depend on attacking the basket, getting out in transition. The Spurs are absolutely elite, defending paint points, fast break points, and most importantly, free throws. That is a huge Memphis boon. In fact, in their last 10, second highest percentage of their points coming at the line, seventh highest in the paint. So with Wemby down there, you'd think it was a problem, and in fact, it was. Then I looked at the game log last January. They had all three of the guys, right? Ja, JJ, and Bane, and Marcus Smart, for what that's worth, and they only got 106 against Wemby, and that game was played at a 99 pace. Then they met again in March with the kind of the bench mob, because after losing Ja and Bane, that game was played a little faster, but Memphis still only managed a 96 offensive rating, and neither team got to 100. So, I mean, you had Memphis under with Houston, which, Houston just continues to wow us with Ahmed Thompson carrying them to more pace and more space. And that was still a bad beat, because there was a garbage time three.
Two garbage time threes.
Two garbage time threes. Ja missed 2 free throws to open that weird door. Otherwise, it might have been a free throw game back and forth. But
right.
I think Memphis, these totals are just consistently at 240, just mostly because of the pace. But you can't necessarily just plug that in like it's a computer program, especially not when you have the alien down there to deny them in the paint.
And especially when we don't know how many minutes we're going to get from Ja. And there's times where it's been close down the stretch and they don't bring him in for normal minutes, or they don't bring him in for, I should say, like increased minutes. They're just keeping him on a sort of 30-minute restriction there. Now they keep trying to win the division. So once you keep getting divisional matchups like this, then it's probably better to bank on him playing at the end of the game. But look, like this is still it's a Chris Paul team. I'm sure we'll see Stephon Castle in there, but he's like a legit power forward when he's out there. He's playing on the block in the dunker spot. Like he's kind of Amen Thompson-ish when he's out there with Chris Paul. When CP's not out there, he's definitely a little bit more of a facilitator, but you still see like Devin Vassell with the ball in his hands, and all these guys I'm mentioning play slow. That's why I keep talking about him. Like Stephon Castle would speed this team up if he could, but even he's used to playing a lot in the half court, especially in that UConn offense. Like honestly, he did sort of run point there. So I think everybody on this team, it just leads to slower pace, to be honest. And I do think you have a good Wemby defender in Jaren Jackson Jr., like as good as you're going to get for the ability to guard him from out to the 3-point line and in. And when Wemby's pulling shots and looking like 7'8" Trae Young, I'm just like, all right, this is good for the under here, man, because like that's not a good shot, Wemby. I know you're open all the time, but that's just not a good shot. And that's a big thing. He's on a downtick right now with that 3-point percentage. And that might be the calling card for the Spurs is as Wemby's threes go, so go they, but he's in a down stretch right now. So one more under for the curmudgeon show today. I'm going Charlotte, Utah under 220.5. Look, these totals are high enough that like going under still can produce a good basketball game with plenty of offense. But 220.5, too high for Charlotte and the backups for Utah. Like if you look at the Utah injury report, right, it's like 2 teams worth of players at this point. We're not going to have Lowry. We're not going to have anybody with the initials JC, Clarkson, or John Collins. Keontae George is questionable. Isaiah Collier is better than Keontae George, by the way. I'm just going to throw that out there. Isaiah Collier has been hooping, but another guy who, yes, he can get out into transition, but he has not sped up the pace for Utah at all. Not nearly as much as a guy like Keontae, or especially Jordan Clarkson, who wants to pull within the first 6 seconds of every shot clock that he's ever faced. So the pace should be a bit slower. If you look at the Jazz in the last 5 games, where they've only had guys in and out of the lineup, they've barely had any John Collins or Clarkson in their last 5. 26th in pace, 9th in defensive rating. They try on defense when you've got like a Sensabaugh, Johnny Juzang, Isaiah Collier lineup, plus Walker Kessler, blocker Kessler, doing work this year. Welcome back to the league, my man. We missed you last season. 24th in offensive rating, though, as a result of all of this. And I will be looking at some Walker Kessler stuff. Centers versus Charlotte, probably Mark Williams, too. I think the centers have big games for this team, but once again, slow pace as a result. 5th in defensive effective field goal percentage for the Jazz, 26th in offensive effective field goal percentage. So it's just not the Jazz you're used to, because it's not the Jazz that we've seen out there. They're 23rd in limiting transition. Charlotte doesn't get out into transition. They're 27th in transition points right now. And like I said, blocker Kessler defending the rim. Opponents, they're 10th in opponent rim points and points in the paint combined. And Kessler will be in this game tonight. Then you look at Charlotte. They're slow. This is not Charlotte from a couple seasons ago. They're playing a lot slower. They're back into the half court way more consistently. Like I said, 27th in transition points. They're 29th in O rating in their last 5, and that's with a healthy squad. That's everybody except for like Trey Mann and Grant Williams. The guys have been out. Everybody else is out there. You got Miller, Bridges, Ball, and that's what we're talking about here. And they are 5th in defensive rating in that time frame. And Mark Williams, who a number of my good friends who I talk to about this stuff daily, like love Mark Williams. Some people make fun of him for it, but when he's on the court, he is a very good center. And that's a big reason for why they're 5th in defensive rating and limiting points in the paint way better than they were with Nick Richards, who has been put onto the reserve and playing like 10 to 15 minutes a game at this point. As far as the above the break stuff, that's the last thing here for why I don't like Charlotte. This is what they rely on. They are dead last in 3-point percentage from above the break, yet 5th in frequency. And Utah has been 3rd in limiting those things because, once again, they have legit defense at the top of the key now. There's no Jordan Clarkson out there for 28 minutes to help you just get to the rim, lay you to the rim. So, I think this is going to be a good like 212, 213 kind of gross game that I don't plan on watching.
Yeah, it's a good call. I think you could also look at Utah +5 at home here. I mean, they got some try-hard guys here. They got young guys coming in, and Walker Kessler was the DMP rest last game, right? So, yeah, that's going to be huge for your under. I don't care what his offensive rating is. He's more important for defense. They gave up, 58 paint points to the Nets without him. Don't be scared off by that last total because that was 19 points in overtime with the Nets. Charlotte, 5-1 to the under against the West this year, 16-6 on equal rest to the under. Like you said, they're an under team. Yeah. And the Jazz are 60% under at home, which is just a complete turnaround from last year. Yeah. But yeah, let me look at Colin Sexton and Bryce Sensabaugh points props, I think, too, because there's just nobody out there to shoot for the Jazz but those guys.
Yep. And the Isaiah Collier rebounds and assists has been so good to me over the last 3 games. Basically, he's up at 13 a game, 14 in the last one. So yeah, I'm going to be going back to his rebounds and assists. And I agree with you, Collier and Sensabaugh season, man. As soon as we get Sensabaugh out there, I'm going right back to him. Love him. So that's all the time we have for you in Best Bets. We are going to be talking more player props in our other episode where we give you guys a bunch of those. So definitely check that out and subscribe to that page. And until we see you next, happy betting.